Welcome inside the School of Communications here at Quinnipiac University. I'm Assistant Professor Nick Pietruszkiewicz, and this is the latest episode of What's Your Story? I am happy to be welcomed by ESPN's Matt Barrie. Matt, thanks for coming out and doing this.
Nick P, thank you. By the way, I nailed your last name at the gate.
You want to take a shot?
I said Pietruszkiewicz.
Well, you didn't. Then you didn't nail it.
What is it?
Pietruszkiewicz. I just said it 30 seconds ago.
So for those of you who don't know, I've never attempted his last name. It's always been Nick P, no matter what.
So I think the logical place to start this is, my first question is, are you going to be nice to me during this?
50-50.
Oh, that was better odds.
If your questions are good, I'll be nice. If your questions are bad, I'll be mean to you.
Okay, sounds fair. So the first episode of this, we had Jimmy Roberts sitting in that chair. He was one of my favorite people, and I asked him this the first question. I will ask you this the first question, and likely the people that come in after this will be the first question is, what was your "this is what I want to do" moment?
It's a great question. I was in high school. I was a senior. I'm from Arizona. Born and raised in Scottsdale. Went to a high school called Scottsdale Saguaro. And I grew up playing sports. I grew up playing baseball and I grew up playing football. So I think I'm 5'10", 5'10 and a half. I was 5'10", 5'10 and a half when I was 11 years old, 12 years old. I shot up quick. And so I thought that I was always ahead of the curve when I was younger, height-wise, for everybody that I grew up.
Never had that problem.
Now, I could say you had your growth spurt at 3. So I always wanted to play sports. Well, as I got older in high school, I stopped growing. And I'm like, well, wait a second. At 12 years old, I was wising there more. I wanted to play college sports. I grew up loving football. And finally, when I realized that competitive sports in college was not going to be an option, that's why I love sports. I want to get paid to talk about it. And I used to watch the local news all the time in Phoenix. We had great teams when I was growing up. We had the Phoenix Suns and the Charles Barkley teams. We had the Arizona Diamondbacks just started. So we had a lot of good sports locally, and I used to love watching local sports. And I was like, you know what, that would be a really, really fun job. And so I was a senior in high school, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I went to college.
So at ESPN, you are anchor of SportsCenter. You do play-by-play for college football.
Yep.
You are host for the PGA Championship and the Masters.
Yep.
You do Saturday studio shows, right? So we're going to get to all that, but I want to go backward first because you don't walk out of the Cronkite School and just show up on the set of SportsCenter or in the booth or driving down Magnolia Lane for a Masters. Can you walk us through some of the steps along the way that got you to Bristol?
Yeah, so when I graduated from Arizona State, at the time, I don't know if you guys know what this is, it's called a VHS tape. It's like about this big, about that thick, and that's what we put our resume reels on. And so I came out of college, I got it on a website called tvjobs.com. Still exists, great resource when you're looking for your first TV job. So I got on tvjobs.com, asked my parents to pay for the subscription because I had no money. And I went and looked at all the jobs that were open in local TV. Because the rule of thumb in this industry, and I stand by it today, even though there's more opportunities now than ever, you just have to get in the door. I don't care where it is, I don't care where you're from. I'm from Arizona, born and raised in the desert, and my first job out of college was in Wisconsin. And it was awful because it's snowing on Cinco de Mayo. I hadn't seen snow my whole life in Arizona. And so I took this job at a small market in Wisconsin. I absolutely hated it. I was homesick. They don't pay any money, but I got into the industry. I got to cover some pretty cool stuff. I would drive to Green Bay and cover the Packers. I would drive to Madison and cover the Wisconsin Badgers, but I didn't like it. I didn't feel that it was what I went to college to do, and I was that entry-level job that I didn't think it was what it was supposed to be. So I get out of the industry, I got out of TV after I was there for a little over a year, moved back to Orange County, California, bartend for a little over a year, start missing the career. I'm like, wait, I'm 23 years old and I'm already out of the career that I went to school for. So I dusted off my tape again, got back on tvjobs.com, took a job in Oklahoma, sight unseen. It was a good time to be there because it was when Jason White won the Heisman in Oklahoma. Adrian Peterson was a true freshman. They went to back-to-back national championship games, so I was able to get into Oklahoma and get a really good tape at the time. And then from there, I went to Columbia, South Carolina, I got the right when Steve Spurrier got the head coaching job, so it was a good opportunity under a legendary football coach. And then my big break in TV came in 2008, and I got a job at the NBC station in Dallas, which is Market 5. It was owned and operated by the network. I traveled with the Dallas Cowboys for 5 years. The Mavericks won the NBA title against the Heat in LeBron James' first year. The Rangers went to back-to-back World Series when I was there. And so it was just kind of a steady climb through local TV to where it got to the point where then at that time, a network called the Longhorn Network was launching. I wasn't really interested in the Longhorn Network, but they were looking for people with Texas ties. And I auditioned with them. It went well. It turned out I wasn't a fit for the Longhorn Network because I was a fit for ESPN. It didn't work out that time around because of a contract with NBC. But then eventually I got to ESPN, accepted the job, October of 12. Started beginning of the year 13. And so, long answer to your short question, local TV and just bounced around. I don't remember, I think it's in the 30s, the Hartford market out here. And you guys will learn this as you go up through your journalism career and your journalism schools. Markets are based one, the biggest is New York. And then I think it goes all the way to 220, which is some small town and some small state and some small area of the country. And you kind of just work your way up. So my path was market 135, got out, had to go back to a 130s, went from the 130s to the high 70s, low 80s. And then from there I made the big jump from the 70s to 5, which is Dallas, and then 5 to ESPN.
So we are surrounded by students who are here for a journalism storytelling summer camp.
Yeah.
So they're at the beginning of the decision-making process. When you were in Wisconsin and then went to be a bartender and then did the other, was there ever a moment of panic that you had to overcome of like, this is all I've ever wanted to do and it ain't working so far?
Big panic. I'm sitting there, look, and I was bartending at a great bar on the beach in Newport Beach, California. Like it was a good gig, but then I was like, wait a second, I just went through college at Arizona State. I've been here, done that. And I really did start to beat myself up that I quit so early. It was kind of a reckoning for me because I knew that every job's not going to be the job you want. I was really disappointed in myself. And I kind of I said, you know what? I don't care where I go. I don't care what I'm going to do. I'm going to get back in and I'm going to go to the end. And whatever that leads me to. And ESPN was never a goal. Because
Really?
It was never a goal because I was brought up in the local TV mindset from Arizona State. You know, get to these local markets, get to a big market. And we were living great in Dallas. Great market, great station, great sports, good money. And there was really no reason to leave. And then ESPN came calling and I was fine in Dallas. My goal in life was to be the weekday sports guy back in my hometown, back in the Phoenix market, which now I believe is market 13. It's a great living. And so it's kind of all based on, and this is one of those industries where you'll get an opportunity when you least expect it. And that's kind of what happened when ESPN came calling.
So earlier the week, to prepare for this, we watched some Matt Barrie clips of SportsCenter, of you wandering into your first Waffle House. You have a lot of the people who sit behind that desk or who call games have a particular style. Like Bob Lee's got a style, Robin Roberts has a style. Yours is, I guess, would it be fair to say conversational?
Yeah.
At times, maybe even a little sarcastic. Maybe. How long did it take you to develop that voice and to be comfortable with this is who I am?
You know, I love that question because when you come, like we all grow up idolizing someone, right? Like we all grow up watching someone. And for me, it was like, okay, Dan Patrick and Keith Olbermann and these guys that started at ESPN. And then my local guys, his name was Mark Curtis out there in Arizona. And then another one, Gil Tyree, who ended up being my mentor. I was his intern when I was in college. You kind of want to be like, because you don't know what your style is going to be because you're a college kid. You have no idea what you're going to be like when you're on TV. So when you first get on TV, you try to be just like them. And you're like, you know what? I'm not really good at this. Like I've got tape of me when I was in my first job, and it's awful. It is absolutely awful. But little by little, the more repetition you get at anything in life, the better and the more comfortable you get. And so when I got to Columbia, South Carolina, I remember meeting with my news director, and he was like, you know, just be you, be who you are, off camera, just be that guy. And I never thought that that was going to be okay in the TV world. And then there was one time I was doing a live shot outside of Williams-Brice Stadium, which is where South Carolina plays their games in the SEC. So It's nuts. And I remember this drunk fan, came up and started to bombard my live shot, and it was just natural instinct to just have fun with the guy and just go back and forth with him. And it ended up being one of the most talked about things that I did at the station because it was just natural. And so that kind of opened the window for me to be a little bit more of who I am. And the greatest compliment I ever get is that I'm the same guy on air as I am off air. Vice versa. I'm the same guy off air as I am on air. I think you can attest to that.
Absolutely.
So I just think it's about being authentic. I do think that in this industry there's a lot of actors. There are people that camera light goes on and they turn into someone they're not. I just never thought for me that's the best way to approach it. And there's a difference too. I remember when I got to ESPN, I sat down with a couple of executives. The first thing they told me is, like, hit the fairway. Like, don't worry about being Mr. Catchphrase guy. Like, we all know the catchphrases. Stuart Scott was a legend because of catchphrases. Well, that's Stuart Scott. That's Dan Patrick. That's not me. And they said, you'll run, and they flat out told me this, you will run your way out of ESPN quicker than you think if you start to try to be catchphrase guy. You can make a long career by playing it down the middle. And so I've kind of always had that in my mind to play it down the middle, but when there's opportunities to have fun, because at the end of the day, we're not landing planes, we're not doing open heart surgery, we're not saving lives, we're talking sports. I've always approached it that way.
It's interesting though, because you're not landing a plane, you're not doing the surgery, but the people that are watching take this stuff very seriously.
Oh, we take it seriously with them.
Really?
Oh, and look, and I've known this for a while. Coming from Dallas, we would travel with the Cowboys every year, from training camp to their ultimate demise in the playoffs in January. In any city we would go to, I don't care where it is, New York, Philly, D.C., heart of NFC East country, we would stay at the team hotel, and there would be Cowboys fans, thousands of them, in the lobby in Philly and in New York. And it's like, man, these guys are like, these are rock stars. Like, these people care. Mm-hmm. And so I knew people cared about the Cowboys then, but when I started doing college sports full-time at ESPN, then you really understand how much it means to people and how rabid fan bases can be. And I get it. Wins and losses mean a lot. We don't make that trivial. We don't make fun of a loss. We don't make fun of, we don't gloat for a win, because we know it means a lot to people. We do our job responsibly, but within a highlight, if there's time to have fun, we'll do it. If I've got a guest on with me and they open the door for something fun, I take it. And so, but you're right. I mean, sports are important to a lot of people, but I also think I would tell any sports fan this to their face, that, wins and losses, it's not life or death.
Right.
It sucks for 24 hours if your team loses. I still haven't gotten over the 1997 Rose Bowl with Arizona State. It'll come on ESPN Classic. I'll probably cry when I see it. But at the end of the day, so I think perspective is big in anything in life. But ultimately, in your career, when you see what people do that really does save lives and really is the difference between life and death, I think we can get over, the New York Giants losing 2 straight and Daniel Jones struggling.
Yeah, my wife is a nurse. I think she deals with a little bit more important things than I do. My
mother was a neonatal nurse. My dad was a police officer. So I came up in a household where there were times I didn't know if my dad was coming home at night, so I had a little bit of a different angle at it than a lot of other people. And so that's why sometimes I'll laugh at sports arguments, because at the end of the day, we have fun arguing about sports. That's why we love it, right? But it's important to keep perspective.
So I have family and friends who have an idea of what my job was when I was a reporter and when I was an editor. Hey, you watch a game, you have a couple of hot dogs, you write a couple of things down, and hey, just stop over on your way home. And I'm like, yeah, maybe at 1:30 in the morning when I'm done. What's the biggest misconception about being on live television and your job?
There's so many of them. We don't just show up and do SportsCenter. The homework doesn't stop in school. I do more homework. I was doing homework before I got here today. Because I got to know a little bit about everything on SportsCenter, because you're doing a little bit about every sport, right? So you're always studying. The prep that it takes to call a game. People think you just show up on a Thursday night, game happens in front of you. No, you don't. You got to learn the depth chart. You got to learn the stories behind the depth chart. You got to learn the kid's family. You got to learn the coaching staff story. So I'd say one of the biggest misconceptions is that you just show up and talk about sports. Yeah, at the end of the day you do, but it takes a lot to get there. The biggest one, and it has nothing to do with the job, it has everything to do with the perks of the job. Everyone thinks I can get them tickets.
Yes, they do.
Can I get tickets to this? And ESPN has the NBA Finals. Can I get tickets to the Finals? No, I don't. I'm not a ticket agent. I'm not a box office. And so I think that's one of the biggest ones: credentials, tickets. We don't use prompter all the time. Prompter's I think for SportsCenter, probably 60-40. There's no teleprompter with me on college football Saturdays. None with you when you're in the booth. When people come at you on social media, they'll say, "Shut up, go read the teleprompter." That's not exactly what we do. So I think those are a couple of them that always come up.
Doing live television, doing SportsCenter, doing even if it's in a college football game or studio, do you have a specific memory of a day when all hell broke loose?
Oh, good or bad? I mean, breaking news, when breaking news happens,
What's that like?
it's the best. I'll go into it. We'll be in a pre-show meeting and we'll be getting ready for a SportsCenter, and I'm always the guy that tries to throw out like, what if this happens today? And the producer's like, no, stop it, no, because it just throws everything into chaos. Rundown gets thrown out, and then you're just flying by the seat of your pants, which I enjoy, because I think it really shows your ability to think on the fly. There's been technical issues. You're always going to run into technical issues. There's always going to be something that happens. We've had a truck go down in the middle of a game where it was just our audio, and we didn't even know if we were on air. Rule number one, your mic's always on. You don't want to be the guy that gets caught saying something on the mic you don't. But chaos is going to happen. Breaking news is the best kind of chaos. I was on my way home from work. I had gotten rumblings from some of my contacts on the PGA Tour. The Tiger was involved in a really big accident, but it hadn't become public yet. I got a call from my boss. I had just gotten off air. I was 20 minutes close to home. Turn around. We need you to come back. Is it Tiger? Yes, it's Tiger. Literally turn around, drive 90 miles an hour to get back to work.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know anything that was going on. We were on air within 20 minutes. No rundown, no real information but a sheriff's office report. And then for that 2 hours, we went straight. 2 hours, just went straight for 2 hours. And for the first hour, we were waiting for us to tell people that Tiger Woods had died. And growing up a huge Tiger Woods fan, I was like, am I going to be the guy that delivers the news to the sports viewing audience that Tiger Woods is dead? That was one of the more surreal days because you just don't know what's happening. You have to have a lot of trust in your producers. There was another day. I was doing the 6 p.m. SportsCenter that day by myself, 5:45 p.m. Boss comes out, go get dressed. No, it was 5:15 p.m. Go get dressed. Well, why? We've got the Tom Brady news. We're cutting into PTI. So I broke the news that Brady was suspended for 4 games for Deflategate. And those are the days you love. Because it's just absolutely chaotic. And I've never been in a control room during breaking news because I'm always on air. But from what I hear in a control room, it's just organized chaos. And that's what I love about it.
So before I came here as a full-time professor 2 years ago now, and Matt knows this, I spent 14 years at ESPN. And I would come in here and teach as an adjunct. I would come in and teach one class a week, usually both semesters, sometimes just one semester. So in 12 years here, I've canceled class once, and it was for the Tiger Woods Day. And I'm like, I cannot leave my desk at home. I was at home. I was in the office. We were going back and forth. There were so many moving parts. And again, it's one of those stories like you don't want to cover bad news.
You don't.
But the energy of breaking news it's probably the thing I miss the most, is I miss the chaos.
You know what I've noticed too in breaking news? Like, I'm sure we've all grown up playing sports. I'm sure you guys all love sports. Typically, if you're into sports and you're playing sports, you're competitive. I'm really competitive. And when the breaking news happens, the competitor kicks in because you want to get on, you want to be on TV first, you want to deliver the news. And that's another thing people forget. We're competitive. You wanted to break, like we all want to be the guy
100%.
that has the story.
Yep.
And so I think that's one of the other fun parts about it that fills those competitive juices. That there are times where you want to be the guy, and it makes it fun. Or the woman, it just makes it fun.
How many times have you had to go on the air, and it's probably a lot, but I'll let you tell us, and had to ask somebody a question you knew they weren't going to like?
Oh, gosh. I mean, the guest, like, it just happened recently. I had Lane Kiffin on, head coach Ole Miss. I was the first TV interview he was doing after his dad died. Well, I can't not ask him about his dad, who's a legendary coach, dying. I knew he wasn't going to like it. I could tell before that he was still upset by it, but I had to ask him. You don't want to because he just lost his dad. But there's always that fine line, too, because you don't want to do two things. One, you don't want to be disrespectful, but you also don't want to be the person in the business, the reporter, the anchor, the host that didn't ask the obvious question, because then that makes you look like you don't know what you're doing. And so the next comparable is during all this golf garbage, you had to ask about Liv. None of the guys wanted to talk about it. None of the Liv players wanted to know the PT, but you have to ask about it. It's better now, but right at the beginning, it was not something you wanted to ask. College football coaches, you're always asking about that loss that stands out.
Yep.
You're always asking about violations that happen with the team, and so you have to do it. It's the uncomfortable part. You can't be all these guys' friends. You can be respectful. There's a fine line to be being friends with everyone you cover and doing your job, and you just can't blend the two.
I've got like two more, and then you're gonna get a break from me and not have to listen to me ask you any more questions. I'm doing. Oh, thank you. I got the seal of approval.
Yeah.
So I've told the students here that I have every press credential I've ever gotten.
Mm-hmm.
I have them on cork boards. I have one in my office. I've got them all around our house. My wife Dana is ready to kill me, but I can look at them and I can probably tell you what happened. What's the most fun? And I can pick one or two out on the board. What's the most fun you've ever had doing this job?
Those runs in Dallas when the Dallas Mavericks went on that unlikely NBA championship run, and we were traveling city to city, just on the ride with them, and you're in your 20s, early 30s, and you're covering the Mavericks in the NBA Finals. We ended up going to Miami with his first year LeBron, and then we were going back and forth. There was this pocket in Dallas where I would go to Oxnard, California with training camp, and I was there for a month. But there was a pocket there that if I hear music from those years on the radio, it takes me right back to that spot. And I think that it wasn't necessarily an event, it was more of an era of time where even at ESPN, and I've done some awesome things at ESPN, but my first master's wasn't at ESPN. My first master's was when I worked in Columbia, South Carolina.
Oh, that would make sense.
So I would have to say some of those runs in Dallas where you're covering a team at the highest level and you're the guy that's doing it. I think that was kind of, because that spoiled me before I got to ESPN. So I'd covered everything. We had a Super Bowl in Dallas. We went to the Super Bowl because it was on NBC in Indy. We had a team win the NBA. We had a team in the World Series. We had a college football national, like we had all of it. So by the time I got to ESPN, it was more studio-based. You'll travel a little bit, but I was lucky to check a lot off the list before I got there.
Because ESPN wasn't really on your radar, you said. I have my memories of walking through that place and at times looking around and, wait, that's Ralph Sampson, or they're shooting a This Is SportsCenter commercial. Mm-hmm. Do you still have those moments of like, holy cow, I work at this place and the audience is this big? Yeah, there were two. There was one, I was there for my audition and I went to the bathroom and I was standing next to Jerry Rice in a urinal. And I grew up a huge San Francisco 49ers fan because we didn't have the Cardinals until the late 80s when I was growing up. And I'm like, oh, no kidding, Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice, by the way, cut Dana off in line for a salad at ESPN once. And Dana has never forgiven him for it. Well, to be fair, Jerry was the employee. It's true. She was the visitor. She had her visitor's pass on. And then Ray Lewis was sitting on a couch waiting to do his audition. And I'm just kind of sitting there with Ray Lewis. And so a couple of those moments. Then there was one day, there were stormtroopers running around. And I'm like, what the hell is that? You know, you just never know what you're going to encounter there. And so there are times you just laugh. You're like, this is peak ESPN. There's stormtroopers over there. There's another famous athlete over here, and they're shooting another commercial with mascots. Second day, they had a marching band going through the third floor of Building 4 for a commercial, and I'm like, Where am I?
That tracks, yeah.
Yeah, where am I? All right. You ready for some questions?
Oh, fire away.
All right. Peter, we're using this? All right. Who wants to go first? I don't know.
That guy.
I-
Tap on it.
I don't think so. Thank you. Make sure you tell Matt your name and where you're from.
Your name and ID. So they're not all from,
No, we got all over the place.
really?
Yeah. Like
all over the state?
all their states. We've had international before too.
Let me see, I can guess by shirts. Kentucky? Nashville. All right. Boston, clearly. What about you? Florida, what part?
Naples.
Okay. Yeah, I love that area. Yep. What about you?
Edgemont, New York.
New York. Where are you from?
Canada.
Canada?
Yeah.
Oh, we'll get a hockey question out of you. What about you?
New Jersey.
Jersey?
Connecticut.
Connecticut?
Michigan.
Michigan or Michigan State?
Michigan State.
Michigan State, go Sparty. Where are you from? Where's that? Okay, Connecticut? Connecticut? Westchester, all right. Some home games, what about you?
From Connecticut.
Connecticut? Boston, all right. You Boston fans are spoiled. The fact that Boston fans were complaining that they hadn't won a championship in X amount of years before the Celtics just won it. I mean, you guys aren't even old enough to remember when it was really, really bad.
Yeah, like the poor Cubs fans who haven't had a title in 10 years or
That's
whatever.
actually one of my favorite ESPN memories. I get a call from the boss. Cubs are in the World Series. Indians were about to win it. It was Game 6, closeout game. Boss calls, Matt, I need you on the next flight to Chicago. Okay, you're a pretty smart guy. You know the World Series is in Cleveland. He's like, get to Chicago. You're going to do all your shows from there just in case the Cubs come back and win the World Series. Got it, no problem. Go out there, do the show the day of Game 6 from Chicago. We did the late night stuff at a place called the Cubby Bear, which is right next to Wrigley Field. So we're watching the game with the fans. We do a hit from the 11 p.m. SportsCenter. They force a Game 7, and I just so happened to be in Chicago when the Cubs won the World Series.
That's pretty.
It was incredible. It was probably my favorite sports moment.
I've told you that was my first job out of college, was covering the Cubs and the White Sox for a paper in Chicago. I lived in one of the rooftops across the street.
What a great sports.
It is awesome. All right.
Fire away.
I'm Jack. I'm from Boston.
Jack from Boston.
You and Galloway and your crew have carried rain delays for my dad, my family, and I.
Yeah.
And how do you mentally prepare for something like that, where you don't really know the end and you have to really ad-lib it?
Yeah, so we know, so the beginning of football season, so this year, August 24th, will be my first college football studio Saturday with the week 0 games and all the way forward. There's always a time of year, hurricane season, everything down in the, lower part of the country. There's always stuff bubbling up. So every Friday night, I look at the forecasted weather for the games that are on ESPN. So you have a pretty good idea of weather's going to pop. There's lightning rules that are in place for college football. And so I can't speak for Galloway knowing about this. Galloway usually doesn't. But I'll dial them in on it. Like there's weather possibilities. The producers do a great job. And so what you do is you do your prep for the weekend. I do the prep for the games that are going to be on ABC and ESPN. I know what the huge games are. We'll watch enough of the game before it gets into a weather delay to where we can talk. And then you're just bouncing around the country. Every week on Wednesdays or Thursdays, our research department sends us out a weekly packet. So I have a packet of every college game in the top 25 and some of the notable ones outside of that going on. And every Thursday morning when I'm out in my hotel getting ready to call my game, I'm doing notes on some of the other games this weekend. So then when weather inevitably hits, we had a time this year, we had a very serious injury in one of the games. And those are different because you got to respect what's going on, but you have to get off it respectfully and get other things in so that they can take care of the player. So I think, again, it goes back to the homework. And then Joey and Dan Mullen are really, really good about knowing a little about a lot with these teams. And then it just becomes an organic college football conversation.
So my name is Jake. I'm from Edgemont, New York.
Yeah.
So what effect has your mentor had on the way you conduct interviews and, act as a journalist?
That's a great question because he was someone I grew up watching. So when I was able to get under his wing and be his intern, I just liked watching how he did things. I just thought he was so cool about how he went about everything. I loved how athletes in the Phoenix area respected him. And it went back to a trust thing because he would ask the hard questions. but then he would ask very smart questions. And so when I saw how the athletes were, and again, this is in an era where, you know, we had really, really good sports in the Phoenix area. These are some of the best athletes in professional sports. How he was able to get along with them showed me that you can do your job. They're going to disagree with you at some point, but you can each shake hands afterwards. I learned a lot from how he conducted himself, not only in public and in sporting events, but around the athletes that he covers, because he was fair, but he was direct. And I think that was just a good positioning for me to understand that. And now, it's not going to always be that easy. There's going to be an athlete that just hates the way you look, and they're not going to respect your question regardless. But I think by and large, they're all pretty good that understand we have a job to do. It's different now with all the social media and all these different ways to get access to them. But I think he taught me, first and foremost, it's a job. They're not your friend. Do your job, and each of you can respect each other and do some really quality work.
I'm Daniel from Ottawa, Canada, and I know you've had a very long career, lots of great things you've done. But if you could time travel to when you first started, what would be like a quote, a motto, or a piece of advice you would tell yourself to just make sure you'd be all right? Yeah,
stay patient. Patience, patience, patience. And I'm not lying to you. Every single job that I got, I would be there for a little over a year, year and a half, and I would say, what am I doing with my life? Mm-hmm. Every single job. And mind you, this is from someone who got out of their career after the first job. Because in the jobs that I had, there was always that dead period, which is kind of now. It'd be July till September, where there was nothing going on. You're still not making great money, and you're living somewhere where you probably don't want to be. And all my buddies back home in Scottsdale, they got into real estate and business, and they were doing much better financially than I was at that particular age. They were living in a place that I loved. I'm like, what am I doing with my life? And every single time that crept in, something would happen at that job to reinvigorate me and put those thoughts to the back of my head. And then every time after that, another opportunity would come. So I would tell, and I'm not a patient person by trade, so I would tell myself, first of all, I would tell myself not to quit early, but I think that opened the door for me to look at this career differently. But I'd say stay patient, because you're going to meet a lot of incredible people. You're going to have a lot of incredible struggles, but I think the struggles are what makes you better. Nothing's easy. This career is not easy. I'd speak to a lot of people that think that I rolled out of ASU, popped on a suit, and popped on SportsCenter. I had a decade of making no money. I had a decade of living in places until I got to Dallas that weren't great. But I have lifelong friends from every one of those jobs, and I respect a lot about other parts of the country because I've lived in just about every single one. So stay patient is what I would tell myself, even to this day.
We're going to make sure to circulate this to the people of Wisconsin before you go up and do a Badgers game.
I love the people of Wisconsin. I love Bucky the Badger.
I'm Rita from Nashville.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, what's your favorite interview that you've ever done?
I got the first interview on TV with David Letterman after he retired from The Late Show. And it was at the Indianapolis 500. As you know, he's a part owner, Letterman Rahal Racing. And we figured, we were like, well, we know Letterman's going to be here. He hasn't spoken to anyone. Let's just request it with his team and see if he'll do the interview. We're thinking there's no way David Letterman's going to do this interview. So we set it up. Our coordinating producer for the show reaches out. He agrees. He'll do the interview. This is like a week before the Indy 500. So we're all excited, but we're still not buying it. So we get to the Indy 500. I think, what was the reason? It was the biggest recent anniversary. It was about 8 years ago now.
Yeah.
It's the 100th, 150th.
Probably 150.
One of those huge anniversaries. So we're doing the show live, and I'm still not convinced David Letterman's going to show up. It's David Letterman. So the CP's getting in my ear, coordinator producer. He's like, they're saying he's still good to go. They're saying he's still good to go. So we go to a commercial break. We have what's called a steady cam, which is the guy that wears the camera brace over his body and he's holding the thing. The CP's like, well, let's just go run the steady cam outside of his trailer. Then we'll know if he's walking into the set. He knows this is the time. We'll see what's going to happen. So sure enough, we're getting ready to toss to break. David Letterman Comes out of the trailer, we got him on Steadicam. I'm like, oh hell, this is happening. So we go to commercial break, and I don't usually get nervous when I'm interviewing people. I've been nervous, I think, 3 times at ESPN. One of them was David Letterman interview. One of them was a Robert De Niro interview. The De Niro story is interesting because I didn't get a chance to meet him during commercial break. They sat him down next to me in the middle of a highlight because there was some miscommunication, and so I just went cold with De Niro. That's a whole other story. So Letterman's coming up. I introduce myself to him. He's a quirky guy. It's a great pre-interview discussion. And then I know that I'm about to interview David Letterman, who's one of the most famous interviewers of all time. And at any point, he could hijack this interview and make it really, really uncomfortable. And it ended up going great. I still have the clip to this day on my Vimeo, just because it was one of those moments. The interview got picked up by a lot of people. And so by far, the David Letterman interview is one I'll never forget.
Hi, I'm Lydia. I'm from Michigan.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, what was your why moment? Like when you were younger, why did you want to major in journalism, and why did you decide to go to ASU for journalism?
The ASU thing, so we grew up in the ASU market. ASU is based in Tempe. We grew up in Scottsdale, which is about 25 minutes from Tempe. My parents had season tickets growing up because we didn't have an NFL team until the late 80s, and we kind of still don't. But I didn't want to go to Arizona State. I didn't want to go because I wanted to get away from home. I wanted to go down to Arizona, go down to Tucson. It was 2 hours from home. So I just wanted to be the rebel high school kid. And then when I decided that I wanted to talk about sports for a living, I said, well, this is stupid. ASU's got one of the best journalism schools in the country, and it's right in my backyard. And it was odd for me to have at 18 years old kind of that grow up moment, like that's the smarter thing to do. But I mean, I had a dorm assignment in Arizona. I was already in, and last minute I changed to Arizona State. And I think the why is because when you grow up in an area, you guys know this, Boston fans, you grow up in an area where sports are kind of like the heartbeat of the area. I'm like, gosh, that just seems so fun. Yeah. And I had so many memories growing up that were great. I thought, well, it can't be that hard to do. And I wanted to be, like I said, I grew up watching the local news out there, and as a 10, 11, 12-year-old, those were my idols. And I just thought it would be cool to be that someone for another kid who loved the sports in their town.
Who else has questions?
So my name's Brett. I'm from Westchester, New York.
Yeah.
What are some techniques and skills that you think everybody covering sports should use and know, whether it's high school or at the professional level like ESPN?
That's a really good question. You know what the funniest answer is? 'Cause I get asked that a lot. You need to know how to read. Like, it sounds funny, but you gotta know how to read. If you can't read at a confident level, you can't succeed in this job. Reading is fundamental. I think it was a PSA back in the day.
It is, yeah.
But here's an example. If you were on camera and you're doing an on-cam about something serious that happened, something legal that went on, you can't screw it up. Because now you're talking about screwing up something that has to deal with the law, something serious with a death. You gotta be able to read it. And if you sit there and you can't read what's put up there for you to read, to be the responsible host and anchor that you are, then you've got no shot. And so it starts by being able to read confidently. Another thing that I would tell people is that there's a difference between reading the teleprompter and reading what's on the teleprompter. You should get to the point where when you're reading, you can't tell what I'm reading. I'll give you $100 and I could show you 2 clips. You wouldn't be able to tell which one's ad lib and which one's reading because you have to get good enough at being able to read the product. Here's the other thing. If you're reading a script and there's video, you got to read it flawlessly. Our shot sheets that we get during SportsCenter, there's 3 columns. There's what happened, or there's the setup to what happened, there's the what happened, and there's the result of what happened. You got to be able to read that. You got to be able to read it to where you're not, And so that's what I would say. Like, it sounds funny, but reading. Read anything. Do your homework and be able to read it. Read it out loud. I still do that when I'm writing my lead-ins and writing my SportsCenter stuff at my desk, I will read it out loud like I'm about to do it on TV, so that the first time I don't do it is on TV and it sounds weird. And so start basic. What age are we learning to read? First grade, second grade, what age is it? Go back to the most basic thing that we were taught as kids, read. And I'd say that's the first thing you would do. And then the second thing you would do is, I never did this because I never wanted to do play-by-play, kind of just fell into it. If you really want to do play-by-play, find your favorite team, whoever that is, turn the volume down when you're watching the game and try calling it for fun. Like, why not, if you're by yourself? And then you'll really learn what a skill set that is.
Do you have to know how to write?
Yes, writing's big too. Now, I will say this for the writer snobs that are all out there, these guys are just different. Like, they're, you know, they're right, like there's a difference between TV writing and, I don't know, what's the word I want to use, print writing. It's not print anymore. What would you call it?
Digital.
Digital writing. There's a huge difference. And TV writing is different, and here's what I'll tell you about that. You don't want to write sloppy, but I'm not going to write something for on cam like he's going to write it for ESPN.com. That's just not the, like, we don't talk like that. And so TV writing is conversational writing in your delivery. Digital writing is print journalism, the new version of it, how you would read it.
Mm-hmm.
Am I saying this right from your
Yeah,
perspective?
no, you got it. Yep.
So if there's a wire, like we have internal wires at ESPN, like if something happens, we will cut and paste the wire into our script so that we have the body of the facts correct, and then I'll tweak it to where it's conversational. Because no one's going to speak the way that you read.
I think it's a lot about platforms.
Yeah.
You're going to write one way for television.
Yeah.
You're going to write another way for digital. You're going to write another way for social.
Correct.
Right? So understanding who you're trying to reach and how you're trying to reach them is an important part. But I think the reason I asked is I think people might look and say, I want to be on TV. I never need to know how to write.
No.
And that can't be true.
Well, no, because at every job you're going to have, like every job that I had, I was a reporter and an anchor. I had to write features all the time. I had to write news, like stories all the time. From day one, you're writing, and you're always going to write. And so you just got to find the balance between the two. TV writing, also, nowadays, they're going to hire you to do 3 jobs at once. You're going to be a reporter, you're going to shoot your own stuff, you're going to edit your own stuff, and then you're going to write a story for .com, whatever station you work at. So you got to be good at all of them.
All right, we got time for a couple more. Kat?
Hi, I'm Kat Murphy. I'm
Yeah.
from Naugatuck, Connecticut. It's February of '02.
Mm-hmm.
You have been out of school for 9 months.
9 months.
And the governor of your state calls you a dumb son of a bitch on air.
I told you this was coming.
What would you tell the next generation of young journalists who inevitably will be called some
Something.
version of a dumb son of a bitch? What to remember?
So we didn't know it happened when it happened. He was taking off his mic. Remember what I said earlier, the mic's always hot? He was taking off the mic and he said it. And then we were watching it back and we're like, did he just call me a... And the funny thing about how that went down was the reporter that was supposed to do it couldn't make it. And they said, Matt, you know, you do news here and there at the station. It was kind of a hybrid role. If we need you for news, we need you to come do the satellite interview with the governor of Wisconsin. I didn't know what I didn't know. Okay. So like, here's some of the questions that the reporter was going to ask. You know, fire away. And so he took exception with one of the questions. I think it was budget cuts with public libraries or something to that effect. I'm like, well, and then I started to dig in. I'm like, well, that doesn't seem like, whatever the case was, I don't remember what it was. I just remember that I sat in on the interview that I wasn't supposed to do. He ends up doing that. It ends up being a huge deal, which, by the way, there wasn't social media back then. Could you imagine that now? And I remember wanting it to go away because you never want to be the story, especially when you're a sports guy and you sit in on an interview with the governor of Wisconsin, who, by the way, I'd been living in the state for 6 months, 8 months, however long it was. And so I would say you're going to have a lot of encounters with people that you interview that aren't going to like your line of questioning. You just can't either A, provoke it, or B, then make yourself bigger than the story. Because nowadays, that'll catch like wildfire. And social media is great, but social media is dangerous. But I remember, like, I would have political groups, and at that point, I'm not even like sure about the political alignment of everything in the state. I just moved there. I'm getting death threats on my desk phone because they thought I was attacking the governor of their political party. I mean, it was nuts. And so I just remember saying, oh my, this no way I'm doing news. This is awful. So I would just say, if something like that happens, distance yourself from it as quickly as you can. Handle what you need to handle. He ended up calling and apologizing. I remember him saying during the apology, oh, by the way, Matt, I didn't know the mic was on or the camera was on. And I remember saying, I don't think that matters, you know. But, yeah, I'm just fortunate it wasn't a thing, you know, nowadays where everything just explodes. And so I would just handle it with grace, class, and try not to. Everyone wants their 15 minutes of fame. I would tell you that's the worst thing you could have is 15 minutes of fame. So try to move on from it as quickly as possible.
Could you imagine if that was today and it was with Saban while he was coaching Alabama or something like that?
Oh, well, Saban wouldn't do that. Saban's a classy individual.
If it was somebody of
Yeah,
his,
someone, yeah.
Krzyzewski,
Right.
Saban,
Yeah.
somebody like that.
Well, no, and look, now, we have a lot of people at ESPN that ask really hard questions, and then, like, Stephen A is perfect for it. Stephen A will go at anyone, into their face, which is why a lot of people admire us. Why? It's like, dude, he'll go right at you. He didn't care. And I just think the way the world's changed and how we approach those type of things. But if you're going to be a straight-up host, reporter, anchor, be respectful with your questions. There's a lot of stuff that goes on right now in our media, notably our political media, where it's got to be a gotcha don't be a gotcha person, because that'll catch up with you.
Let's do one or two more and then wrap up.
Commercial breaks.
Oh, gosh. I've said it 1,000 times. If we were rolling on commercial breaks and aired those live, we could charge a top flight subscription and call it ESPN Platinum. Because it's when all the funny conversations happen. It's when you're talking about something completely irrelevant to the show. The producer has to get in your ear and be like, guys, shut up. Here's what's coming for the next block. But it'll be anything and everything. And it's just a lot of fun. It's at some point you're working with your friends, and it's a good time.
I'm Lila. I'm from New Jersey.
Hi.
I'm just kind of wondering, like, when you're doing interviews, like, you have a conversational style. Like, what happens if it kind of like doesn't go to plan? Like, the conversation isn't really happening, or you're kind of like just not going well. It's
It's a good question because that happened recently as well. I won't give you the name, but it happens, and the person just isn't giving you what you want. This is lesson 101 with an interview. Never, ever, 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 under any circumstance, ask yes or no questions. Don't do it. Because if the person is smart, and most of the people you interview are, if you ask them a yes or no question, they're going to get out of there with a yes or no answer. Okay? So if you be conversational and you do your interviews with what, where, why, and how, should go pretty good. And at that point, you're going to know if they're going to take the bait or not. And one of the things, Tom Rinaldi and I still keep in touch to this day, you could literally, I tell every journalism school that I talk to this base layer question. What do small kids always ask their parents when they say, don't touch the stove? What's the kid going to ask? Why? You can do an entire interview by just asking why. So-and-so joining us now. Coach, you guys let the fourth quarter lead get out of the way. You guys blew the fourth quarter lead. How did that happen? Well, we just didn't have the right play call on. Why? Because we were talking late, we got the communication in, the quarterback didn't understand. Why? Well, because and you can literally just sit there and go, why, the entire time. And so I would say that with an interview, you're going to know pretty quick. My method, what I like to do when I'm doing a live interview on SportsCenter, it's different when it's taped, because then we can edit it, one, to fit time, but two, you never edit an answer because journalists, that's not good. But I always start off with a lighter question. If I'm interviewing one of these coaches at SEC Media Days, Coach, 3 weeks left in the summer, what are you going to do with the rest of your time? Inevitably, they'll laugh and they'll say, well, Matt, we don't have much free time, but I think I'll go on vacation with the wife. Well, where are you going to go? Oh, we're thinking about going to Italy for a few days. She's always wanted to go. Well, why? Because she's got it married. Now you got it. Now the guy's all yours because you got him off his mind of football. Okay, how's your team going to be this next year? And then boom, you're in. Well, we have a little bit of depth issues at the why. And I'm telling you, if you guys take that to heart and just know that you can ask why, go back to being a 3-year-old. Because an open-ended question gives you an open-ended answer. If I just said to you, do you like swimming? How would you answer?
It's fun.
There you go. Well, what did that Q&A just do for my interview? Nothing. Why do you think swimming's fun? Fine.
It feels nice when you're hot, I guess.
See how it changes the dynamic? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you see how that changes the dynamic? If I say to you, do you like sushi? See? Like, you're just going to say yes or no. Point being, if you ask the yes or no question, if they're smart, you're going to get a yes or no answer, and you're going to fail. So I would say to be conversational in an interview, have a realistic conversation, but who, what, how, where, and why, and you'll be good.
So I really appreciate this.
Yeah.
Before I let you escape, any last words of advice? What advice would you want them to walk away with?
There's a bunch. We could sit here for 2 hours. But the first one is be careful with social media. I'm just telling you, Snapchat, TikTok, I'm not on either of those. I'm on Instagram, and I guess I'm an old guy on X because I don't know if you guys even use that anymore. It's a good news source. But be careful on social media. I said it before. Everyone's looking for their 15 minutes of fame. And while those 15 minutes might be really, really good, it could really, I've seen more careers ruined from social media than I have seen elevated. So be careful with that. I would say be patient. Don't have it locked into your head what you want to do. Be open-minded about how you want to be in this business. I never wanted to do play-by-play. It happened with an overnight phone call on a different time zone and a need by ESPN, and now I couldn't picture not doing it. So be open-minded, be careful on social media, and always say yes. No matter what, always say yes. You get an internship, and here's something no one's going to tell you. Enough with this internship. You need to be paid. I had 3 internships growing up. I wasn't paid a dime. You get real life experience.
Yep.
You're going to get paid. Go get a part-time job. Say yes to every opportunity because you just don't know who you're going to meet, who's going to end up being your mentor, who's going to end up circling back 5 years in life, and a person that you were nice to. And that's the last thing I'd say. Being a good person is free. It costs you nothing. Treating people with respect costs you nothing. I could tell you stories about on-air people that have treated behind-the-scenes people like hell, and wouldn't you know it, 6 years later, behind-the-scenes person just happens to be a boss.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And it backfires. But most importantly, we're all in it for the same thing. So just because you're on air, just because you just treat everyone with respect, that's base layer life stuff. Because you never know. This is a small industry. I mean, I had a guy who worked as a producer at one of my stations who ended up being a hiring manager at another. Well, what happens if I wasn't a good person to him at that former job? 0 chance I'm getting that next opportunity. So be kind. And I think you guys will understand. And there's more opportunities now than there was for me. We didn't have all this stuff when I came out of college. And so you guys are in a good spot to get in if you keep your head down and you know that it's going to be a lot of work. And I don't mean this to be rude. None of you, when you graduate college, are going to turn into a TV star the second you graduate. You're just not. It's going to take time. And if you're willing to put in the work, it's worth the payoff.
So the be nice part here at the end, you've ruined it because I was going to thank you for coming despite such a disappointing performance in the Tumblebrook member guest this weekend.
I don't want to talk about it.
I didn't think so.
I don't want to talk about it. We had some putting issues.
But I appreciate you coming out and doing this and being on the latest episode of What's Your Story. Matt Barrie, thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy.